Hello, sir.
How are you?
My name is Jaakko.
Jaakko?
Yes, I'm from Finland.
Oh, I like that. But the Dolphins got fins, and you got the land, Finland.
That's true. That's true. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I'm traveling across America and hearing different perspectives on this land, this beautiful, great country.
Deep. I'm real deep. I'm the closest one to H or mother would know.
Well,
and M, because where was the L?
Do you think, what's your name again, sir?
Recorded by Oni and Sony with no pony, but more like a horse that aliens to alien.
In what kind of a state is America right now?
Well, not even close to an 8 or a state, but something more or less than that. Even had to be player hate, but player hated the most. And guess what happened when the burnt toast got all black and still eaten by who?
What do you think about Trump and Biden?
Known as Wyandotte. In a pond or a swamp, more like a lake or a teardrop that got dropped from who? You also thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. See ya.
Meidän matkalla selvittää muuttuvaa Amerikkaa. Mä ajattelin Detroitin olevan paljon puhuva pysähdyspaikka. Kaupunki, joka oli aikoinaan Amerikan vetovoimaisimpia, on nyt paikoin jopa Tšernobyl-mäisessä jamassa. Mä ajattelin, että ehkä tällaisessa menetetyn loiston tyyssiassa, jos jossain, olisi aistittavissa Amerikan jakautuminen.
Tässä taustalla näkyy reliikki Detroitin historiasta, autokaupungin historiasta. Täällä on valmistettu luksusautoja, Packard-autoja ja Studebaker-autoja. Mä laitan dronen ilmaan ja katon, mitä tuolla näyttää.
1900-luvun alkupuolella Detroit nimettiin Motor Cityksi, eikä suotta. 3 suurta, General Motors, Ford ja Chrysler valmisti autojaan Detroitissa. 1950 noin 4/5 koko maailman autoista valmistettiin täällä Detroitin seudulla. Mukaan lukien tällä tehtaalla, joka sittemmin on ollut keidas graffitille ja Detroit Technolle.
This is the image of Detroit and Cleveland to me, and Buffalo and all these Rust Belt kind of places. I mean, it's been like this my entire life. So, yeah, very classic to me. Do you want to drive down a couple of these blocks?
Yeah. Kaupungin kulta-aikoina 50-luvulla asukasluku paisui 1,8 miljoonaan, mutta on nyt laskenut 600 000. Siis 1/3 siitä, mitä se aikoinaan oli. Lopputulema on maisema, jossa nykyisen keskusta-alueen ulkopuolella aikoinaan tiiviiden korttelien sijasta on nyt niittyä ja siellä täällä siitä täplittävä rakennus. Valtakadulla ajellessa taas näkee isolla rahalla rakennettua suurkaupunkia, joka on nähnyt parempia päiviä.
Täällä on vähän tämmönen niinku jopa dystopinen fiilis, koska monet paikat on aika huonossa kunnossa ja hohto on menneisyyden lumia. There was a lot of money in everywhere and the automotive business was strong.
Yeah, I mean, this is like marble.
Yeah. And there's bronze and marble here.
Yeah.
Kiinnostaa kuulla näiden ihmisten ajatuksia siitä, on tämmöinen työläiskaupunki, että kuinka täällä koetaan tämä Amerikan jakaantuminen. Koetaanko täällä, että poliittinen järjestelmä ei enää palvele kansalaista? Ja koetaanko täällä vain syvää turhautumista ja apatiaakin niin kuin kaikkea politiikkaa kohtaan?
Nimittäin ihan vaan ulkokuoren perusteella vaikutti siltä, että elämä Detroitissa olisi välttämättä mitään ruusuilla tanssimista. Meidän ajellesi ympäriinsä mä näin Cheap Charlie-nimisen työvaatemyymälän. Mä halusin ostaa sieltä ainoan mukanani tuoman housuparin lisäksi uudet housut. Ja sainkin ne, varsin huokeaan $4,5 hintaan. Kaupan päällä me saatiin kuulla Cheap Charlielta itseltään täyslaidallinen Detroitin ja USA:n nykytilasta. Ja hänellä oli paljon sanottavaa.
It's an interesting place. A lot of good. How old is the shop? When was it founded?
Been here since 1969. I've been here 21 years.
Cool. Do you think there's the divide between rich and poor in Detroit? Is it becoming clearer?
Well, it's becoming clear because the middle class is diminishing, and you either have money or you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, the middle class is suffering.
How do Detroiters feel about their future? Are they optimistic or pessimistic?
If Joe Biden's in charge, not good.
Why?
it's just this regime that's ran this country for the last 4 years. It hasn't been good. I see the difference in the people that shop down here. The price of groceries gone up. It's massive inflation.
Do you think it's Biden's fault?
Yes.
Personally, Biden's fault?
Yeah.
Or
and what's going on at the border is ridiculous. Why would we let all these other people? We have people here starving that we can't feed. Why are we letting all these immigrants in that are not good people? They're basically emptying prisons in Mexico and South America and say you can go, but you can't stay here. You got to go to America. And we let them over the border, and he gives them asylum. And if they have a baby here, they're a citizen. And you know, all our tax dollars are going to pay for all this. You know, and the debt we've increased, and the money they keep spending, the money they send to Ukraine and Israel and all that. I'm not saying we can't help, but nobody else is helping. Why are we stuck with all this debt? If Donald Trump was in office, Putin would have never got started. He wouldn't have let it happen.
Why? Why do you think so?
Because they feared him. They know he's a little crazy. But I'm not saying Donald Trump's the right man for the job, but he did a lot better job than the guy we have. But you know, Joe Biden, I listened to his speech when he did the State of the Union speech. He did say a lot of good things I liked about Social Security and how the wealthier companies in this country need to pay more tax, and us as the middle class need to pay less tax. I believe in some of the democratic ways of the way they do things. Any president I've ever had, there's things he does that I like, there's things he does I don't like. Donald Trump will do a way better job than this guy's doing. Donald Trump should have won the last election, but I think they fudged it. You know, they stole votes, they ran a bunch of ballots. I don't know what they did, but they scammed the election.
What makes you think so?
Because the Democratic people are very corrupt. You know, this whole country is very corrupt. From the city of Detroit to the government, they don't care about us.
Cheap Charliella ei ollut vielä ammukset loppu.
You know why things went downhill at the end? Because the Chinese, he imposed tariffs on the Chinese, and Chinese imposed germ warfare with the COVID virus on the whole world.
You think so?
Oh yeah. That was done on purpose. They directed it towards us, but it ended up getting bigger than what they realized, and it spread to the whole world.
Where did you hear
It's called germ warfare.
That's a
Read
thing.
about it.
That is a thing, yeah.
Yeah, they started this in some lab in Wuhan, and it got out from there. You know.
Where did you hear about this?
You hear it every day in the news.
Yeah.
All you gotta do is listen to the news. You know.
Which news channels do you recommend?
Fox. You know, but I think the news is. I think the press is very corrupt too.
That's what I hear.
Very partial. You know.
Yeah.
But you can't control it. We're controlled by the government. But it's still one of the most freest countries in the world. You know. I'd rather live here than anywhere. You know. Hang on, I gotta take this call.
Cool. Hey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for coming down, guys.
Yeah, hey, thank you a lot.
I've been waiting for a guy like that to, well, you just spill his beans in the way that I know a lot of people do. I appreciate his moxie.
Moxie?
Yeah, that'll be a hard word to translate. You know, his kind of courage and brave, like his courage to express what he thinks and not care what other people will say about it. Balls, you know? I appreciate his balls. That's a guy. That's a type. I'm glad you saw it.
Me tehtiin juttuja, joita Motor Cityssä kuuluu tehdä. Syöttiin detroitilaista pizzaa, ihmeteltiin muistoja menneisyydestä.
It's an old recording studio. It's from 1939, and it recorded like old blues legends, like it says there, Jimmy Lee Hooker, and jazz legends like Dizzy Gillespie, which is very cool. And we just walked upon it, and it's it's a rundown old building.
Illalle me ajettiin pitkin kuuluisaa Woodward Avenueta, jonka varrelle kulttuurielämä on jo vuosisadan keskittynyt. Mutta aika pian keskustelujen jälkeen tie alkoi muuttua tyhjemmäksi ja pimeämmäksi. Kuten Cheap Charlie oli antanut ymmärtää, näkyi merkkejä siitä, että tässä kaupungissa joillain on ja joillain ei ole.
I mean, what the fuck? What kind of fucking place is this, man? This is not smart to do.
What do you think could happen?
I mean, just like somebody could fucking stop you, like pull you over.
Now I'm gonna sound like a fucking scared suburbanite. Look, I don't know. Nothing has ever happened to me going through any of these areas, to be honest. I've never been fucking robbed. I've never been fucking held up. I've never been fucking anything, but you know, I don't really like to test my luck with it. Fucking dark, and there are no police here, and definitely there are people in this city right now that are looking for people who are not from around here, who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, that's just a fact.
Noille samoille kaduille kätkeytyy myös Detroitin vanhin blues-klubi, Raven Lounge, jossa jokin vanha henki oli vielä elossa. Paikan tyypit kertoivat, kuinka tuokin kortteli oli aikoinaan ollut kuin aiemmin meidän läpiajamamme Woodward Avenue, täynnä elämää.
Jam-packed. Yeah, Mr. Kelly's Lounge, the Star Lounge. And I seen the rise and I seen the fall.
Mutta sitten autotehtaiden lähteminen, kaupungin huonosti hoidettu talous, vuoden 1967 mustien ihmisoikeustaisteluun liittyneet rajut mellakat muun muassa muuttivat Detroitia perusteellisesti, jolloin asukkaat ja rahavirrat suuntasivat muualle. Tälläkin hetkellä kaupunkilaisista 3/3 elää köyhyydessä. Rikoslukemat on korkealla, yleinen hyvinvointi matalalla. Muuan tutkimuksen mukaan Detroit on Amerikan onnettomin kaupunki.
And I just say that the cost of living is real high.
Yeah.
Going to the market is a trip.
Why do you think that America is declining?
Number one, government. Number two, politics. That's all in the making.
Who are you gonna vote for?
I don't know. I ain't got nobody to vote for.
Yeah, bye.
Mutta haasteestaan huolimatta Detroit myös houkuttelee tulijoita.
Täällä on tarkoitus mennä nyt Dearborn-nimiseen kaupungin osan kautta kaupunkiin, jossa iso osa väestöstä, ihmisistä siellä on Lähi-itä taustaisia.
Kun mediaa ja ihmisten puheita kuuntelee, kuulee usein sanottavan, että maa muuttuu liian nopeasti. Amerikan muutos todella on näkyvää. 2010-luvun alussa nimittäin suurin osa Amerikassa syntyneistä vauvoista ei enää ollut valkoisia. Vuoden 2045 kieppeillä taas suurin osa kaikista amerikkalaisista lakkaa olemasta valkoisia. Dearbornin asukkaista reilu puolet on Amerikan arabeja ja pohjoisafrikkalaisia. Mä olin kuullut ja lukenut paikan herättävän huolta joissakuissa amerikkalaisissa, jotka epäilevät paikan olevan kenties liian epäamerikkalainen.
It's an Arab American National Museum.
Mua huvitti tavata ihmisiä ja tietää, oltaisiinko ehkä siellä maan jakautumisen keskiössä.
Do you want to park, maybe?
Yeah, we can park.
This does feel like the main stretch, maybe. Yes.
Alkuun pääsemiseksi mä ajateltiin etsivämme ruokaa, mutta kadun ravintolat olivat kiinni. Hän sanoi, että syy johtui Ramadanista, mutta ainakin päästiin juttelemaan ensimmäisen paikallisen kanssa.
Before I lived in Germany.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, I
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Oh, bisschen Deutsch.
Ich auch
Wie heißen
spreche.
Sie?
Ich heiße Jaakko. Wie heißt du?
Vajamashi. Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you a couple of questions for my documentary about Dearborn? Interview.
So my English is not good, that's why. My English, yeah.
Okay.
If you want to come with me, my friend, he speaks good.
At the barbecue?
Yeah, at the bar.
Let's go.
Yep.
Hekään eivät halunneet antaa haastattelua, mutta vinkkasivat auki olevan ravintolan.
Go visit Darbuna restaurant, Darbuna.
Ravintola Darbunassa me saatiin viimein apetta ja tarjoilijakin lupautui haastateltavaksi meidän atrian jälkeen. Ruoka oli melko keskinkertaista, mikä sopi hyvin keskinkertaiseen kaupunkinäkymään. Tällaisilta kaikki amerikkalaiset pikkupaikat mun havaintojen mukaan näytti. Pitkä suora tie, jonka varrella on paikasta toiseen toistuva valikoima matalia liiketiloja. Tunnelma oli kuitenkin hyvin ystävällinen.
But I show you my pictures. That's my kids.
Sure. Just a second. Can I ask you about a couple of questions?
Yeah, sure.
So, were you born here?
Actually, I born in Baghdad, Iraq.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hän pakeni Irakin sekasortoa Amerikkaan reilu 10 vuotta sitten.
Well, how has it been? What do you think?
Huh?
How has it been?
No bad. It's cool. Yeah. We're doing good. We're doing good. So we're working hard. We're trying to be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We work like 12 to 14 hours.
Every day?
Every day, yes. We have to, you know what I'm saying? So we can live a good life, you know what I'm saying?
What about American people who lived here? Did they accept you? Did they welcome you? Or
Yeah, the American here are really nice people. They welcome to everyone. They come to US. And even when you start, like, first of all, when you start talking in English, they trying to let you understand. They talk slow. That's the nice thing of them. Like, they trying to let you learn their language. You know what I'm saying?
what about? But you have children.
Yeah.
They seems like they were born here.
Yeah.
Do you think your children consider themselves to be American or
Yeah, of
Iraqis?
course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
They have. When they're born here, that means they have the American culture, American life, and you know, is be American. Not maybe 10% is Iraqi, but 90% American.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think of yourselves as American or Iraqis?
Yeah.
Like,
We here we are American.
You're American.
Yeah.
I'm
They're
dealing
American.
as American. I'm not dealing as Iraqi. I'm living in US, so I have to deal like American. If I live in my country, I deal as my Iraqi. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, is there a mosque nearby? Can we go to a mosque? We're not Muslims.
Yeah,
so-
there is a mosque. It's in Ford. Yeah, you can go in it
Yeah.
and take a picture and. Huh?
I can take you there.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you going now?
We can go now.
See you soon, Hussein.
You follow me.
Yeah. The story is writing itself.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Mä olin utelias moskeijaan menosta. Islamin usko vaikuttaa mulle niin kokonaisvaltaiselta asialta ja tyystin erilaiselta kuin tapaluterilaisuus, että mä en edes ollut varma, oliko mun kaltaiseni ei-muslimi tervetullut sinne. Siispä mua kiinnosti nähdä, löytyisikö siis ehkä moskeijasta jotain merkkejä USA:n sisäisistä jännitteistä.
The right here. Come in peace.
This says come in.
Yeah, come in peace.
Okay.
If you like to go in, you need to take your shoes off. Yeah.
And then if we go in, then what do we do?
You can take picture or
Yeah. You sure?
yeah. That's the main dome here.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice design and. What?
She's like writing something.
She's writing. Maybe she have
Like
homework.
like a
or-
homework. So people come here to do
Yeah,
homework.
sometime. Yeah.
And then just chat or like hang out. Are there some rules here? What kind of rules are there? Like
There's no rules. I mean, anybody can come here to pray. You know.
How about like I don't know, something that we shouldn't do, mistakes.
Nobody bother you. The
Okay.
people has come to here.
Okay.
This place to pray.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mä olen ensimmäistä kertaa käynyt moskeassa. Olen yllättynyt siitä, kuinka tämmöinen rento tunnelma päällä on. Jotenkin mulla on vaikea puhua, koska mä silti mietin, että mua katsotaan täällä. No, imaami opettaa taustalla Koranin.
The first reason is God's wisdom. But before I prove the soul, God's wisdom. The second reason why we believe in the afterlife is John, the essence. Assalamu alaikum. I hope you enjoyed the lecture.
My name is Jaakko.
My name is Mohammed. How are you?
I'm good.
So you will cut the video and stuff like that, right?
Sure.
if I stutter or.
I will. Don't worry about
or I
that.
said something dangerous, you know.
All right. What is the meaning of everything you're wearing?
This is a long cloth. That's what Prophet Muhammad and his household, the Ahl Bayt, they used to wear. It's a sign of more chastity, more modesty.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you wear clothes and the more you cover your body, it's a sense that of you're trying to be more spiritual.
What about the rings?
For example, this is the most important ring. It's called aqiq. It has all the best spiritual benefits, as we say.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another aqiq, but different color. And personally, I love the green color. That's why I'm wearing green aqiq.
Suits you well, that color, the green color. Well, how would you summarize the very basic message of Islam?
Islam is peacefully submitting to the will of God, understanding that I have a higher power, that it's higher than me, that knows more than me, that actually is trying to protect me from the evil around. And I think that's simple. Let me say we have fixed values that we abide by and we follow, but at the same time, we are not judgmental individuals. I can't judge a person who was born, raised in a way that he used to do something or celebrate something that I don't consider it as a holy or sacred. It's not hard to actually live as an American, but you are a Muslim also. It's not impossible.
I learned a lot.
No,
thank you.
Nice to meet you guys. I have something inside.
Excuse me. Were you studying there?
No, we were just reading,
reciting Quran.
Okay. And how often do you come here to study it? Study the book?
During Ramadan, we'll come every day.
Every day? Is it not boring? It's old text and hard to read?
No, it's actually interesting because you learn newer things.
Okay. Well.
So things that you never knew. Especially, I like to learn why am I here? Why is everything like the way it is?
Till today, I still learn something new from them every time I read them.
It's like watching a movie over and over again.
Yeah,
you get new.
It's like you pick up new details.
And then also.
They've asked us to. They're just talking to the PR person here.
Yeah.
About. This.
We gotta go.
Representation. They would just like to talk with you and maybe stuff.
Of course, yeah. Okay.
What are you guys doing?
Tässä kävi niin, että paikan henkilökunta tuli hyvin päättäväisesti tiedustelemaan, millä asialla me oltiin kuvaamassa. He keskeytti haastattelun ja johdatti meidät sivuhuoneeseen. Heidän kasvoillaan oli hymy, mutta maistin vahvaa jännittyneisyyttä.
Has there been any? I think I read some news about some people being, I guess, just scared of or critical about Dearborn.
Right. Because
why
we get
is
a lot
that?
of.
Why is that?
It's not about being scared about Dearborn. It's the Western media and what they portray.
Explain more. Elaborate, please.
Well, what I'm saying is that there's a lot of people outside of Dearborn, outside of the United States, or even outside of Michigan, that portray Dearborn as a scary place because all Muslims come, and it's not. It's just what the Western media wants to portray someone.
One last question. This is a bit a kind of sort of unrelated question, but other news, they talk about American polarization, that America at large is divided. Do you have any perspectives on this? Do you think America is divided?
No, not at all. Not at all, and you won't find that here either.
Yeah.
Even being an Arab American here, I do not see that.
But America
because even
in
the
general,
Arab, because even the Arab American Muslims, you'll have some Republicans and you have some Democrats. It's not as what is portrayed out there.
Oh yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Seems like the media lies.
A lot. And if you just spend a week here in Dearborn or even one full day, you'll find out that a lot is being exaggerated outside.
What are the biggest lies or exaggerated things that the media says, which is not
the
true?
Muslim people are bad people.
Who says that?
A lot. A lot. Even if you're, I mean, we do get discriminated against. You know, that's why you'll find around here security. You know, we always have to hype up security because you can find a wacko that will just come in. But that doesn't.
Did some wackos come in?
Yes, they do. They try,
what
but
do they do?
we know how to handle the situations. But we make sure that anybody that walks in feels in peace and safe. That's our two main thing when anyone walks in. It doesn't matter.
I slip through.
Yeah, and that's why we stopped. Like, hold on a minute, you know, we have an event today, so like most of us were going, but we're all built on volunteers. The center's built on volunteers.
Yeah, okay.
So you'll find anyone's welcomed. I mean, anyone.
Me jäätiin vielä rupattelemaan ja he kertoi mulle vielä, mistä heille Ramadanin viettämisessä oikeastaan on kyse.
It's a month that we need to give back to the community and give back to mankind. We do a lot of charity work. We do a lot of giving to the poor, to the needy, to the less fortunate. And it's a time to...
Sounds like communism or something.
Communism? No, where'd you get that from?
No, like social democracy or something.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're giving back. Yeah. You're not listening.
Wrong word.
I think you're trying to get something out that's not going to help you. You understand why you speak to us?
No, I didn't mean that. What I mean is that there's a lot of communalism, perhaps.
Yeah, community.
Community.
Yeah, community.
Yeah.
There's a lot of community work. There's a lot of, there is a lot of,
But hey, you have to eat.
Yes.
We've been holding you for too long.
It's
So
okay.
I have been.
It's okay. It was a pleasure meeting you. It was a pleasure meeting you. You again more than welcome to come and join us. And we just ask of you to spread the right message.
Yeah.
That's all we ask.
Well,
good luck.
Have a great evening.
Alamak.
Bye bye. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you. See you. Bye.
See you. Thanks for your time and guidance.
It's like a Mr. Beast video. we snuck into a mosque. we snuck into the largest mosque in North America during Ramadan.
The communism question.
Come on.
Why was it that triggering?
What do you mean, Yako? Come on. This is an anti-communist country. Are you? That's more. You just tried to compare Islam to communism? What the fuck are you trying to say? Come on. Are you kidding? She questioned everything then. What the fuck am I doing letting these people talk and walk around here? They're trying to cause a mass atrocity in this community.
Thanks for saving me with the communalism.
Yes, I had to say that. I said that. Like, no, that's not what he means.
Me yövyttiin tällaisessa melko halvassa ja vähän nuhjuisessa ketjuhotellissa. Paikan vastaanotto virkailija selkeästi kohtasi päivittäin laajan kirjon amerikkalaisia. Dearbornista ei ollut löytynyt suurta konfliktia, mutta ehkä hänellä olisi jotain havaintoja maan tilasta.
No breaks. Good morning, Comfort in downtown. Miss Rose, how can I help you? Okay, I still cannot give out any information about my guest. I'm his wife. If you're his wife, you wouldn't be calling me.
What did he ask?
She wants to know how many people are in the room. She don't know the room number, but she knows the name. Okay?
Like a stalker or something?
No, it's probably a wife trying to find her husband cheating.
Oh, yeah.
So she's trying to get the room number from me. I'm not slow. It's not my first rodeo.
Cool. So could you introduce yourself first?
My name is Rose. Born and raised in Detroit, 6 Mile and Van Dyke. Been working here at Comfort Inn for about 14 years.
Okay. Well, and feel free to smoke at the same time. I don't mind. I don't want to take any more of your time. So yeah, you're from Detroit, and Detroit has a reputation. How would
I hate that because I mean it's like any state where you have your good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. And like I said, I've lived in the good neighborhoods. I lived in the bad neighborhoods. I've lived in the poorest and, you know, most rundown neighborhoods to where, to me, the best people were. You know what I'm saying? Like, I lived in Harper and Van Dyke. My block literally was so many vacant lots. Like, it was only like 3 houses, but we knew each other and we looked out for each other.
Have you ever heard news about America being divided or polarized?
You mean divided by what?
Like politically.
Oh yeah, we're divided politically, racially, economically. Like, we're divided all kinds of ways. Where, I mean, we shouldn't be, but yeah, we are, without a doubt.
So I read there was a poll, like a survey or something, and if I remember correctly, 40% of Americans thought that like a civil war, a second civil war is not off the table. It's in the realm.
Oh,
what do you think?
No, I hope not, never. Are you a civil war?
Yeah, like that's...
Honey, that would kill me because my ex-husband is black, so my children are biracial. My grandchildren are black.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't do a civil war.
But it wouldn't be like the first civil war. It would be more like a Democrats,
Economically,
Republicans.
Oh yeah, no, I hope not, because I'm Democrat. My bosses are Republicans. I hope not. Yeah, that would be bad.
No, okay, so you don't think so. Do you think that Americans in general get along well? No matter their political affiliation.
Oh yeah, definitely, because I get along with a lot of Republicans and best friends, family members that are Republicans for that matter. And my sister is a Republican, and we just don't talk politics. That's all.
Yeah.
So we get along.
So what do you think of the whole presidential upcoming elections?
If I could vote for Mickey Mouse, I would.
Yeah.
I don't think there's no one good promising. At this point, I would take Trump back.
Yeah.
And I'm a Democrat. I would take Trump back at this point.
But do you have trust in the political system or in the government at all? Or is it just...
I'd say about 70%.
70%?
Yeah, 70%.
But do you more trust just other Detroiters taking care of each other?
Definitely.
Like the community?
Oh yeah, definitely, because I see that too much.
Yeah.
I see that all the time. All the time.
More trust in the people than the
Oh yeah,
system.
definitely. Oh, heck yeah.
Hell yeah. Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Cool. Interesting. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, honey.
This is very interesting.
It's like she did make it small. And I only say that because if you look at, can you see my cursor?
No, I still can't. I can't give out any information on my guest.
See where my cursor is? So there's this space for Camel here.
You're welcome. You still calling back. That's crazy. Hi, honey, what you got?
Haahuilu Detroitissa ei ollut johtanut sisällissodan kytypaikoille, vaan pikemminkin päinvastoin. Mun otanta on rajallinen, mutta mulle tuli fiilis, että ihmisten mielestä kaikenlaista jakautuneisuutta kyllä on. Mutta että ihmiset kyllä pärjäis, jos julkinen sektori pitäisi huolta perustarpeiden toteutumisesta ja jos media ja poliitikot eivät loisi juopaa ihmisten välille.
Carlos, nice to meet you. Tough cookies out here, man. They stand up for themselves. They know right from wrong. They stick together.
Tämä kuulosti toisaalta luonnolliselta, toisaalta oli myös hämmentävää, koska tutkimusten mukaan antipatiat väärän puolueen kannattajia kohtaan on todellisia ja niin jyrkkiä, että ne toiset nähdään isoimpana turvallisuusuhkana maan tulevaisuudelle. Ennen kuin matka jatkuisi Detroitista eteenpäin, me käytiin vielä muuan kirjakaupassa.
This is the welcome committee. This is James and you are?
My name is Jaakko.
Jaakko.
You know what? I recognize you. I sort of came to meet you.
Mä olin kuullut Detroitissa aiemmin asuneelta kaverilta, että paikan omistajan kanssa kannattaisi jutella.
This is not the first time the world has been in a mess. Now we're being shaken up. The forces and the energy of the world. To rethink, redo, re-know, re-understand, reimagine who are we as a species. The climate thing is making us do it. The migration thing is making us do it. The food thing is making us do it. Now, I think that if we would let ourselves seek conflicting times as an expression of people coming to new understandings. I don't think about division, that we're divided. I just think that there are many people who have never had to think more deeply about the nature and the substance of America, and now they're having to because people are speaking up real loud. And that real loud is scary. Come on in, we're having a round table right here. Thank you. Hey, how you doing? Yeah. Are you here to browse or pick up or what? Browse around. Yeah.
We'll leave you to your
okay. he's from Finland, and he's going around the world, around America, talking about. Do you think America is divided?
Totally. There is division within division. That was already divided.
How's America divided?
In this group of people, like, let's just pick Trump and Biden. I mean, families have been divided.
Yeah.
Social groups have been divided
because
of this, and I've never seen that before. And and I don't know if it's a fact due to social media or what's going on.
Media in general.
Media in general.
Can you think of like a turning point when things started going wrong?
My opinion?
YouTube, right?
I truthfully think when Donald Trump announced his candidacy and just came out and said anything he wanted to say, I think there was just there's always been, with the presidency and any political figure, some type of respect for the other side, and all that just kind of went out. It was horrific, and it just kind of spurred on, I think, everyone's ability to say, you know what, if our president can talk like that, say things like that, then I feel free to do it as well. And it's maybe that wasn't the exact starting point, but I think that was a big catalyst for it.
Okay. Come on in, we're having a round table. No. Go right to the desk. Are you picking up?
Maybe it was almost inevitable because things just kept rolling on and further. I think there's a lot of people that feel marginalized by our government, feel marginalized in society itself economically, and when people get pushed that far, I think they tend to react.
All the people I've talked to, they seem like sane, normal people, friendly people. I haven't met any very extreme people yet. Where are they?
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're everybody. And they're all over the place. And they hide their intentions well. I'll say it like that. And then sometimes they just don't have an intention. They're just living that life that they live. And they're sort of, cool with that.
I think what you have to do if you really want to find a group of people like that is you have to go to some very politically, what do I want to say?
Well, we're going to a Trump rally tomorrow, actually.
There you go. All right. Go to it.
Enjoy.
I'll remember this.
Those good questions.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Excellent.
How you doing?
What a lovely owner this is, the
Awesome.
bookshop owner.
Definitely.
Yeah. What's this shop?
We're specialized in mushrooms.
What kind of mushrooms?
Culinary specialties, wild and exotic mushrooms.
Like psychedelic mushrooms or?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
They're still illegal.
Let's hope they legalize them soon.
They will.
Well, they will.
They're going to legalize it, and then the people will wake up, and then there'll be no more government.
All right.
I see a very beautiful future.
Sinä kuulit oikein. Me oltiin menossa syvemmälle, Trump Rallyin. Tavoitteena oli todistaa ja kokea, mistä kaikessa oli kyse.
Exit the traffic circle onto the ramp. In a quarter mile, turn right.
Nirvana Center Cannabis, King of Buds Cannabis Company.
And this giant star-spangled banner.
Herbs, cannabis. Oh yeah, because this is right near the Ohio border. That's why all this shit is here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did I just expertly pass all of the gas?